We're gonna spend the next half an hour or so talking about fashion, which I think is a subject incredibly dear to my heart, in the sense that I've always loved clothes, but as I've got older, and I don't know whether this is a common experience, but it sometimes feels like a party that I'm no longer really invited to. So I'm looking forward very much to talking to Gail about this, because she's a real insider. If I tell you that she was the youngest fashion editor ever at 26, when she became fashion editor at the Daily Mail. And so she has had a long and very illustrious career in the whole world of fashion. And as I said, I'm really looking forward to picking her brains about all aspects really of fashion, both as we get older and also what's coming up and what we can expect when we come out of lockdown. So Gail, let me come straight to you. Let me ask you, first question is, because you joined, I think you became fashion editor at the Daily Mail in the mid-80s. So what do you think has changed over the intervening years? You know, we've had sort of 30, 40 years been working in this industry. What would you say has changed?
Oh golly, that question covers such an enormous variety of answers. In 1986, it was when, I suppose, greed was good was the slogan for everybody. The original film Wall Street, and for me, I have to say, if I had to be a fashion editor in any 2 decades, the 80s and 90s would have been the ones. It was the emergence of the Italian fashion designers. It was the arrival of new names that we'd never heard of before from America. It was the era when, although I will admit we'd had models before like Twiggy and Christie Brinkley and names like that, it was the era of when models became supermodels, and we knew them by just one name alone, you know, Christy, Naomi, Linda, etc., etc. And for me, I was so young, but I was so enthusiastic. And as you just said, fashion had been my whole life. I think it was a much kinder, easier world. We'd go to the fashion shows in Paris or Milan or New York. You'd write your copy, you'd come home, and then it would go into the paper. There was no internet, there were no mobile phones. The first time we had machines that the photographers brought with them probably was in the early 90s, and these were such antiquated things that a photographer would take photos of the Versace show. We think we'd have a scoop maybe, so we'd send it back to the Daily Mail in London. But that meant he had to get the film ready in his bedroom, in the hotel, whatever hotel we were staying in, develop it, put it into this antiquated machine, send it down the line back to London. Then I'd write my copy on a very strange kind of machine that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't work, sending copy. And I think fashion was quite important to then. There were distinctive trends which really don't exist, I don't really think, anymore. You know, it was the time of a jacket, a black skirt, 80 denier tights, and a pair of heels. It was the era of power dressing. And, you know, we've gone through so much since then with grunge and, you know, long middies and maxis, hippie dressing. So I think we've come an incredibly long way, but I'm not sure I'd want to be a fashion editor today, having to do social media, blogs, report from the shows as they happen. I think it's a very different world.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that the whole idea of really strong fashion trends has gone by the by. So do you think that makes it more difficult or easier? Because easier in the sense you can write about more or less anything.
Yes.
You can choose your trend and say, oh, this looks like a trend because you've seen a couple of influencers wearing it. Or does it make it harder because it's actually, it's anything and everything in a way?
I think in some ways it is easier because it means you're not driven by the fact that someone out there is stating, oh golly, this summer you've got to wear a midi skirt, or you've got to wear a mini, or it's tight jeans or flared jeans. These days I think you should, and always should have been, able to wear what suits you best. It is harder in some ways. I mean, there are trends. I had an intern working here with me just before Christmas, who's 22, and she's studying at Kingston University, textiles and fashion. And she showed me what I no longer have access to, which is the trend people, the fabric people, the people who 2 years at least in advance will decide, okay, pink is this year's colour. And actually, strange enough, one of the trends was a lovely pastel-y, peachy pink colour, a really lovely warm tone. And so that's what I did for a fashion page for Platinum magazine based on what she told me. So there are trends.
Yeah, yes, but I think they're quite subtle,
Yes.
in a way. They're moods as much as anything. I mean, I can remember very well the 1980s and 1990s, which were the years that I went back to, went to work properly.
Mm.
I didn't start work properly until 1986, but the whole thing was, the shoulders, the suits.
Yes.
The fact that I was in a business environment and I wanted to look fashionable, and the hair, everything. There was just a whole look, wasn't there? And I really genuinely don't feel that that's true anymore. I don't know whether that's because I'm older and therefore I don't feel that I'm particularly trend led in lots of ways, or that it just isn't like that anymore. Anyway, that was a lovely potted history. Thank you for that, Gail. I'm very interested in what you know about the fashion industry at the moment, because we're just going through a pandemic.
Mm.
It must be unbelievably challenging right now to be running any kind of fashion-based business. Is that so?
I think it is incredibly hard, and we've seen the huge losses this year and last year on the high street with names that we would never ever have thought disappearing, that have just vanished totally. Strange enough, though, there have been winners in the pandemic, and what that has tended to be is the small businesses who you might have thought would have gone under, but actually it's all online. It always was online. That's how they started their businesses. And I know some of them have had a sort of 300% increase in growth, which in these times is utterly phenomenal. But I sometimes wonder whether we actually had got to a point of maximum overload where we possibly had too many choices on the high street, all selling us very similar things, just at slightly different price points, and some more high fashion, some lower fashion. And I think some we will miss dreadfully, and some actually you'll suddenly realise, oh, well, I hadn't been in there for 5 or 10 years anyway.
Which are the ones that you think we're going to miss dreadfully?
Well, I'm not sure I will miss Topshop at all, but I mean, I do relish the days of the 80s when, yes, and I do relish the times when I would take my daughter shopping there, and we would come home with, a bag full of items for her. Debenhams, well, I loved the way Debenhams, probably, I can't remember whether it was late 80s, early 90s, introduced, they were one of the first people who took British fashion designers and gave them their own label at a, I won't say bargain price, but a much lower price point. So I think I'll miss that side of things, because they championed people like Jasper Conran, John Rosher, God, so many others I can't even think now.
Who was the one called Betty something or other? Betty
Jackson.
Betty Jackson. I bought 2 or 3 pieces in Debenhams. Yes. That were Betty Jackson pieces, and I absolutely loved them. In fact, I would go, we've got a local Debenhams, we used to have a local Debenhams I could walk to, and pop in there and always go straight to that concession, because it really, you know, it was wonderful. And I really, you know, felt sad when Debenhams closed, and you used to think that is shutting off a whole avenue for really nicely designed clothes, nicely made clothes, and a very reasonable price. So
yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. What about Marks? I mean, Marks and Spencer's is one of those subjects, whenever I write about it in a blog, or, you know, put something about it onto Super Troopers, I get a massive response to it. And I think it's because as a generation, we have a very sentimental attachment to Marks and Spencer's. You know, and there was a time when I would go into Marks and Spencer's regularly and buy, you know, I'd buy my kids' clothes in there. I'd always buy my underwear in there. And if I was in there, I'd have a look and often spot something and think, oh, that's nice. You know, that's nicely made and it's worth it. But it's years now since I've done that. So, you know, I'm wondering about them surviving. Do you think they will survive?
You know, I'm not actually sure. And for me, it's very hard, because the PR for Marks and Spencer's back in the 80s was the most phenomenal girl. And it sounds strange, but she was the first person who put that link together of supermodels in Marks and Spencer's, so high street clothing. And the Daily Mail were luckily enough that we got the exclusive on that, and it was Claudia Schiffer. And Claudia Schiffer came and spent 3 days in the studio, and we photographed her wearing Marks and Spencer's collection pieces. Now, I admit the complaints always were, oh, well, it's only in Oxford Street or Marble Arch, and this was pre-online, so you couldn't get to it online. But I think those were slightly unusual pieces. And I'm not sure. I mean, you and I spoke last week about their new idea to bring in designers. But I'm just not sure whether bringing in people like Hobbs and Sea Salt or whatever will actually add anything positive to the mix. I think their recent link-ups with Ghost were absolutely fantastic, and were obviously what everyone was looking for. But I'm worried about the people that they've actually chosen.
What, the actual brands that they've chosen, do you mean?
Yes, because I think you're likely to go to Hobbs rather than go to Marks and Spencer's to get Hobbs. Yeah. I think they should have been slightly more aspirational, like John Lewis's have done, and done connections with designers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I wonder if it will just bring maybe a different generation or new people into Marks and Spencer's, because they'll be inquisitive about it. They'll be thinking, oh, I'll pop into Marks and see what they're offering or whatever. I mean, they need to do something, because they just got to get people to come in and have a look, and hopefully when they do go in and have a look, they'll like what they see. I'd like to actually move the conversation on slightly to fashion and age, really. I think, I mean, I know that you agree with me in the sense that age shouldn't be a reason or a barrier or you know, something that you think of in relationship to what you're wearing. I mean, age shouldn't be the first consideration, which is great in theory, but in practice, I find that when I go shopping now, quite a lot of the things that I go and look at might not fit me, and they might not fit me because my body has changed. So there's an issue there, and I'd really like to know what your take on it is. I mean, obviously you were you were 26 when you became fashion editor of the Daily Mail. You've stayed you've stayed within the fashion business in all this time, but you also have aged. So
Yes,
you've gone through the same metamorphosis, if you like. So what's your take now, looking at fashion in relationship to age and older women and so on and so forth? What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I totally agree, because probably in my 20s, the first place I'd go to look was Harvey Nichols, which was a very different store then to what it is now. I don't think I've been in for 2 years, because when I went in last, I felt invisible. I felt as though I didn't belong at all. The other thing is that I think the prices of fashion relative to what people are earning are now extreme. Whereas once designer labels might have been affordable if you saved up for them, now I can't really see many people, except the 1%, saving up for them at all. And you are right. My Instagram may be called "My Age is Irrelevant," but I do think that there are things that are very relevant, that, I no longer want to show my upper arms at all. So I will always have a long sleeved blouse unless I'm on holiday, where I don't really mind at all. We perhaps have tummies that we didn't have before. And as you say, boobs have got bigger or whatever it might be. So you have to shop carefully. But I'm not someone who thinks, oh, I'm a size 8 or I'm a 10 or I'm a 12. I just think, well, I'll buy what fits me. So I don't mind if the label says 14 in it. If it works for me, then that's how I would shop. I also know from a conversation I had recently with another company that those of us who are 50 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus don't want to be pandered to as a separate generation, as though we're somehow complete aliens and distinct once you cross a birthday. But I do think there is a growth area for collections that take into account the needs that we have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, my desire, it's almost what I wish Marks and Spencer's could become, would be a Zara for our generation. And the reason I say that is because I often, when I'm up in town, I'll pop into Zara, and like, she said, usually it's large. Sometimes I need extra large, which I think is their 15, 16, but it doesn't matter because it's the same garment. And I'll just take a pile of stuff into the changing room and just try it all on. And just see what will work for me. But if I could go somewhere and reliably know that these clothes have got a fit and a cut that will work on my older body, it would be so much more pleasure, because I actually often come out of Zara empty-handed.
Yes.
Occasionally I come out with something that I think, this is quite a little gem here, and it might be quite an interesting. I mean, I bought a coat in there, like a summer coat, and it's just lovely. This sort of thing is great pleasure. And if only I could find something where I could go reliably and know that this would fit me and it would suit me as well.
What we don't want is the style element removed from it just because of age, and that's what seems to be the problem. I mean, trousers with elastic waists seem to have become terribly fashionable for everybody.
Yes.
But I wouldn't wear them in a million years, because they just make me look big round the waist, or give me no waist whatsoever, make my hips look bigger. So for me, that wouldn't be an option whatsoever. I'd rather have a well-fitting pair of trousers that are comfortable in the right size than trousers with elasticated waists.
Another thing that I want to talk to you about, because it's been happening, I think I looked in my wardrobe this morning. I thought, well, what have I bought since we went down into lockdown? Because it's nearly a year now, and there's hardly been during that time any opportunity to shop, or any shops open, in fact. And I think I found there were about 4 or 5 things in there. Now, of those 4 or 5 things, at least 3 of them I bought online, and when they came, they weren't quite what I expected. Now, I
No.
didn't send them back because there's quite a big hassle factor. And I thought, well, they'll do, but actually I haven't worn them again. One is a blouse from Hush. One is a jumper from Kettlewell, in fact, which was described as like a sharp green, but actually it doesn't look great on me. And the other one was a Hobbs jumper that I bought from John Lewis. So, any thoughts that you have about buying online, because we're doing it more and more, and yet again they only show clothes online on skinny, tall, young models, and it's very, very hard to judge when you look online as to what it's going to look on you, like on you. So, any thoughts about that?
Well, I was completely astonished when I was in Los Angeles about 2 years ago with my daughter, who is now 22, at the time would have been 20. And we went into the big Nike store there, and there was the first plus size model in a Nike shop that I have ever seen. Now, I don't tend to go into Nike shops very often. It's because my daughter's a personal trainer. But I don't know whether they've rolled that out here or not. There is another again, sportswear company called Girl Collective that you can find online. And they, rather incredibly, do photograph. All their models are completely different shapes, sizes, ages, whatever. That's a good one. And there's something I've seen recently. I just can't remember at the moment, but if I can, then I'll come back to you and you can let everyone know. Where again, they have taken, I think whistles do different ages, or jigsaw do different ages, but they don't do different sizes. And this is another area where I suppose people like ASOS have, and a lot of the other high street brands have taken and really run with plus size. A friend whose husband owns a model agency says that his demand for plus size models is now a third more than what you'd call the ordinary size model, who just happens to be a size 10.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's a whole area that I just wish to goodness that they would address, but I'd like them to address not just the size element, but also the age element, because things drape and hang differently on an older body. And I see something on a young body somewhere, and I look at it, and then I might buy it and try it, and then on me it just looks completely different, because I am not, I've got an older body, and that's massively frustrating. And I'm interested in your work with Platinum, because Platinum is an interesting magazine in that it's really unapologetically for our target age group.
Absolutely.
Well done them. I think they're doing a really good job. They tend to have swerved that whole thing about always putting younger models in and so on. And I think you're doing quite a lot of work with them. So again, what's your brief there, and how do you approach that?
Well, my brief totally is, obviously I only use still life pictures on the pages that I do. I don't do any shoots with models for them at all. And the brief is, I can't, even the still life or the flat lay pictures cannot be on models at all unless they're over 50. So if we were going to use, one central image with just cutouts around it, that model has to be over 50. And that is a rule that is not broken at all. And we try really quite hard, to keep things to a budget. I would say I try to rarely use anything that goes beyond the £300, and I try to keep as much as I can under that. And I do try and think that it's very difficult on a magazine, because you are catering for such a broad parameter of tastes and styles. And I know from the street style pictures that they run, there are some people who are trendier than me and, are in their Doc Martens with a pair of tight jeans and a big coat thrown over the top. But I've also got to think of those people who perhaps don't want to dress like that, don't want to be in a sort of boho folklore dress with puff sleeves, which at our age is probably the biggest no-no ever. You know, I only wear shorts if I'm on holiday, and I would veer on a maxi dress over a mini dress. So I think, you know, we try really hard to fit the market that Platinum Magazine is aiming for.
Yeah, I can understand how difficult it is if you have to do it within certain parameters like that. But on that note, what do you think? You know, we're hopefully, you know, we're all vaccinated. I think most people watching this will be vaccinated by now. I've certainly been vaccinated. Now, hopefully, we're going to be let out sometime soon. So, what should I go and buy, Gail? I'm desperate for some new clothes. Really put you on the spot here, but you know, what do you think would be a nice thing for me to go and look for, and to cheer me up, to make me feel better coming out of lockdown, and something that I'd like to put on if I was going out for lunch or
you already, I know, are a lover of colour.
Yes.
So I would suggest, it's got to be something colourful that suits you really well. I think I would possibly go and find a dress that isn't a sort of tailored office type dress, but also isn't a peasant-like boho dress. I'd want to find something in between that had some softness to it, but made you feel happy. I can't think of one off the top of my head at the moment, but I will.
And where would I head to? You know, I mean, I can get into London very easily once I start using the train and the tube again. So, you know,
someone who prefers to go into a shop and try things on.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that would be a treat for me. Certainly at the moment, it would feel like a massive treat for me. But I quite like poking around the shops and trying things on.
Okay.
You know, it's not a chore. I look forward to it. So where would I go and have a good old poke?
Well, I did write down an enormous list, but I didn't think that was the question you were going to ask me.
Okay.
So, strange enough, not really liking department stores, but I do think that Phoenix probably has a great selection, A, of designer labels that perhaps aren't the most usual. B, they do cover a variety of price points. So that's somewhere definite. I actually haven't had a chance to be there yet, but there is a wonderful new shopping area near King's Cross. Life of me, I cannot remember the name of it, but someone will probably pipe up and say, oh, Coles Yard.
Okay.
It would be tempting to go and do something completely bonkers, like go somewhere like that, which has lovely cafes and is perhaps outside of your comfort zone. I know friends have been there, and there was a lot of journalists reporting on it when it opened, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I must admit, I have been meaning to go there ever since. Where else would I go?
Maybe you and I could go.
Sorry?
Maybe you and I could go together.
Yes, that would be a good one.
And then I'll write a blog and tell everybody about it.
Yes. The label that, strange enough, I seem to have been drawn to lately is Ralph Lauren, not the designer label, but the Lauren and the other one, because they seem, I know someone like Pippa Middleton, who isn't our age at all, but I do like sometimes what she wears, and they seem to have really nice dresses and sweaters and blouses that are probably what I'd call expensive, but in the sales are exceptionally good value. And I'm seeing lots of people are talking about their local stores.
Yeah.
And I am a huge one for supporting small boutiques. And I know that's sad that because they don't apply to all of us. You know, I have a friend who opened one in Wandsworth, and she has struggled, but she does online, and it's a really good shop. But there's another one. Oh, golly, I've gone completely blank. She's a French lady who's down on near the coast. There's one called Un Dimanche de Paris, who has a shop in Barbados, and Paris, and she's now got one in Marlow. So I think these individual boutiques sometimes have the kind of things that we're not going to see on our friends, which if we've gone to M&S, we might all end up in the same jumper or something. So it means a little bit more sorting out and perhaps joining groups on Instagram. And also, going back to another completely different point, I use Pinterest a lot for style advice and interest, and you can follow people. There's quite a few. There's Linda V. Wright, who owns the most phenomenal cashmere shop and shirt shop in Paris, but she's online. She's about 76, I think, although if I've got the age wrong, I apologize. There's Icon Accidental. There are so many. There's Elon Musk's mother, May Musk. There are an awful lot of women out there who are 60 plus, whose style is, you know, rather catching. And I would quite like to look like a lot of them in my next decade.
Certainly the Accidental Icon, I think she looks fantastic.
Yes.
You know, she's wonderful. I mean, they're all good tips. I tell you what, if you send us some of these people and links and things, suggestions and ideas, what we'll do is we'll put it underneath the video, because I know it will be interesting to everybody watching this. They'll be really loving it. And if they, you know, if these things are available online and so on and so forth, so that, you know, they're not, we're not excluded. Those people that are watching this and think, well, it's all right for Trisha, she can get on a train going to London. Well, I can't do that. That's fine. So, you know, they're available to other people that way. And by the way, I'm wearing a top which is Ralph Lauren. What you mentioned. So again, I think I bought this in, I think I might have bought it in Phoenix. I love Phoenix, actually. I do think Phoenix in Bond Street is a great store for poking around, and it does have unusual stuff, and it does have different price points. And I bought this top, and it has matching sort of jeans, blue, and it's a very bright cobalt blue, which I love. And I think I bought this outfit to go to on holiday probably about 2 or 3 years ago. But it's a great, you know, I agree with you. It's a good brand, that one. But anyway, let's go back to conversation with Gail. I had a lovely group. Gail, did you have a nice group?
Oh, we had a lovely chat. Yeah, it was great.
Good, that's really nice. Talking about very short people, you know, people that are sort of 5 foot, 5'1", the challenges of that with sleeves that come down to here, and you know, the thing about being not typical. I think it's really, you know, it's really challenging. And we were also talking about the benefits sometimes of having a handy dressmaker who can actually make something work specifically for on your body that might be just slightly off or slightly wrong. And what a you know, boon that is if you've got the right person who can do it.
I think the best thing to have is find yourself possibly in a local dry cleaners, someone who does alterations.
Yeah.
I've been incredibly lucky to find one here in Wimbledon Park. His wife is a couture dressmaker, and he seems to be able to alter anything. He chopped about 8 inches off a pair of trousers I'd bought the other day, because they obviously were made for someone of 6'2" and not me at 5'4". So
well, I need that person's name, and as that's just around the corner to me, I can walk to Wimbledon Park from here. So yeah, I thought
you might be able to do
know that person. Bryony, you've got some questions there, have you?
Yes, we have had some questions. So first of all, just a question about your new website, Gail. Someone has said that they have followed you with interest for many years, and they've checked out your website, Pre-Loved, earlier today, and has noticed that the clothes mentioned were ranging up to a size 12. Do you anticipate getting any in larger sizes?
I know that there are some size 14s, because I know there's one client who donated an awful lot of her clothes, and she, depending on her weight, was either a 12 or a 14, and she is a size 6.5, 7 shoe. It is hard. I am desperate for people who, and in fact, I just had the most beautiful Joseph shearling, but we've decided it's the wrong time of the year, so I've sent it back to her. and we're going to put it up again in September, which was a large. So yes, I am always on the lookout.
Can you
for
just tell
those.
us a little bit about your website and just explain it to everyone?
Okay, well, it's quite funny because someone in my group called Wendy Ralph, interestingly brought up the very important point that we've sort of glossed over completely, is where things are made these days. I know probably a lot of you have read about the Boohoo scandal and the factories, and we all possibly have watched Stacey Dooley's fashion documentary about where our clothes are produced. And I think that whole side of things we haven't really touched on at all. And I had the idea to sell vintage and pre-loved, and I want to sell new alongside it, because I think that's how we actually live and work and integrate things. So I started building the website myself about 4 years ago. And although I did launch it in 2019, I had to change the name. So it came out, and we only relaunched in May of last year. So, I mean, I sell things that cost from, I think the lowest is £45 up to rather astronomical Hermes bags at sort of £8,000 or £9,000. And I take everything in between. I've learned not to accept things that have been worn too much because they tend to come back. So I'm now much pickier about what I choose. But because of that, and another side to fashion that hasn't been mentioned, which is the new rental apps and companies that exist, I started going to a lot of events that were talking about sustainability and eco-friendly, and had people from websites and Marks and Spencer's and from Vogue and everything. And I learned an enormous amount. And of course, sadly, it all stopped last February, March. So I am desperately looking forward to find out anything new. So that was really the whole thing about buying quality clothes, looking after them really well, having them tailored, although I would always suggest buying something a fraction larger and having it taken in, and not trying to do it the other way. It doesn't work the other way around. Does that answer it? Or
yes.
Yes?
So a question from Marilyn. She said Trisha often mentions the buying power of older women, but still she finds it difficult to find things that are relatively affordable whilst covering your knees, your tops of the arms, and other things that perhaps women don't like to show.
Yeah.
Why is it that retailers and brands are not interested in this age group?
This is a question that probably everyone has been asking. And as Trisha pointed out, I was only 26 when I joined the Daily Mail. I wasn't really thinking about it, although my mother would, nudge me, and all her friends would nudge me every so often. It is a huge growing market that is, I think, often totally ignored by people, totally. And I have no understanding of why.
Yeah.
A lot of people, especially during the pandemic, have saved a lot of money and like Trisha said earlier, want to go out and have a little spending spree. I think the difficulty is that what is one person's affordable is another person's expensive.
Yeah. And
I often have no idea whether, when someone says they mean affordable, do they mean a jacket at $49.99, or do they mean a jacket at $299? And everything in between. That's, I think, a really difficult, and that's a sort of one-to-one conversation on people's spending power.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky.
I'll just come here just in relationship to that, is that I think it's this failure to engage with the older age group from the point of view of fashion. It's even worse than the fact that they ignore it. So I think they actively dismiss the idea of being associated with older age group because they think it taints their brand. So let me give you an example of that. I've had a catalogue come through the door the other day. I flicked through it and I thought, okay, there's nothing in here that speaks to me. The models don't speak to me. One or two of the clothes did speak to me, but they were on, young models and so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, if this brand actually had 2 or 3 outfits on an older model, I would then consider it. This could be for me. I'd have a look and I might buy something. But I think the reason they don't put an older model into those catalogues that come through the door, and I get quite a lot, is because they think that if they do, it'll put off the younger ones and it will be a taint. And that's what really upsets me. It's the profound ageism and attitude of, ageist attitude of quite a lot of brands who think, oh God, no, we don't want people to think we're for old people.
But you see, that's interesting, because for so long it was sizeism that companies didn't want their brands tainted with. You would never ever have seen things above a 14 or maybe a 16. So Evans was the only company that I knew, and perhaps something like Long Torse Alley in London, perhaps, that dealt with people who didn't fit in a conventional bracket. And yet everyone has embraced plus size models, and it most certainly hasn't tainted their businesses whatsoever. In fact, it's enhanced them to a great degree. So maybe we need to start a campaign and shout a bit louder.
I'm up for that, Gail, all the time, because honestly, I just do wish, same with magazines, I just wish they would just show things always routinely as a matter of course, always on an older model, just so that I could just get an idea that it might be for me, that it might work on my body.
Well, one of the best things Vogue did, I think it was last year or the year before, was when they did an age issue. I mean, the fact that it's even called that is embarrassing to start with. And they had Jane Fonda featured in some of the clothes, but I found it terribly condescending. I mean, okay, if we can all afford to have that work and dress in very expensive clothes, then that's fine. But I think you are very right. Things need to be aimed at the ordinary, everyday woman who makes up the majority of this country.
Yeah, it just needs to become commonplace, not exceptional, and not. No. It's exceptional at the moment. I mean, it hardly exists, and it's anyway. Bryony, have you got any more questions before?
Sorry.
That's okay. I think we've probably just got time for one more. Helen was saying she is in the market for some sort of more tailored suits and trousers, and so where would you go to now for smart trousers? What brands would you recommend?
Okay. Without hesitation, I would suggest Arket. Sorry, Arket. It's the grown-up sister of H&M, but I have bought quite a lot of their jackets and trousers, and a lot of French, Italian, and from this country influencers on Instagram wear their clothes a lot, and I think they buy them rather than being gifted them. Massimo Dutti, and Hobbs.
Yeah.
Has anyone looked at Seffin, Samantha Cameron's label?
I've looked at Seffin. Again, she always shows, because she's so slim herself.
Yes.
She always shows on really, really skinny people. But one or two of the things that I've seen on there, I've really liked. I mean, it's a bit officey. I often feel
it is a bit.
It's very corporate. It looks like you're going to work and you're going in at quite a high level. You're a senior manager or whatever.
I've just thought, because I've got them on today, I am wearing a pair of trousers, which you can't see at all, but they're just a plain navy wide leg with quite a bit of stretch in them that I probably bought 15 years ago from an Italian company called Piazza Sempione. They are brilliant. I think you can get them in Phoenix and Liberty and online and possibly Harrods, but I'm not sure. Their fit is absolutely fabulous, and like all Italians, they're very good at tailoring. Me&M, which I've forgotten to mention, which was started by another mother who was at the same school as my daughter was at. Her prices sometimes can be high, but I think her cut and the colours that she uses are fantastic, especially trousers and jackets.
We're going to put all of these recommendations from you on this below this video.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't panic, anybody that's you know, all of you who are still listening to this, because you know, you'll lose track. But we will, as far as we can, gather all this information together from Gail and put as many recommendations as we can underneath the video. So, you know, that way you won't miss out. And thank you so much, Gail. I mean, gosh, I think this could go on for another hour, and we
could, couldn't we?
We need to, well, you know, come back again, and we'll do another session perhaps a bit later on in the year. But
okay.
That was absolutely brilliant, and you know, such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, I now can't wait to get out there and try and buy something new to wear, I can tell you. And we'll you know, we will make a date to go to that area of King's Cross, because I'd love to do that. And
Old Yard, yeah.
Yeah, and you and I can have a little bit of a poke around, and we'll write it up afterwards and see,
Yes.
see, you know, maybe I'll be transformed into some, you know, I don't know, rock chick, boho, God knows what, which is about as far away from me as you can get. But I'm up for reinvention. So thank you very much indeed for that, Gail. Great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you everybody that did eventually manage to come in. You know, if you missed the first 10-15 minutes, you can watch it on the video. So we will put the video out of it, so you won't miss out in the longer term. But big apologies yet again, and we'll certainly make sure that doesn't happen at all in the future. So thank you, and bye-bye everybody, and look forward to seeing you. I think next live one is Friday for the film club, if you want to come to that. So bye-bye everybody, and thanks again, Gail.
Bye-bye, thank you.